What do you think it is that makes this town, Chicago, so perfect if you want to start a stand-up career?
Well, I got into comedy from a paper I wrote in college about it, which is like the least funny thing ever. And Chicago, for me, just because I got in through improv, it's a very big improv town, and the cool thing about improv is you can just fail, and like no one sees you, because no one watches it. But you get to perform in front of audiences, which is, I think, like a great way to find funny. And a lot of, like, I know TJ and Nick Vatterott, and a lot of Chicago comics started in improv, which I think is just like a really good way to kind of learn. But also there's this magical thing about Chicago, and it's not necessarily the most positive thing, but it's a very segregated city. The good thing about that is for comedy is that you can perform in multiple pockets. Like you can do comedy in the South Side, or like at a hipster bar, or among like, you know, like the Wrigleyville kind of fratty set, or like in the West Side, which is like predominantly Latino, and test out a joke, and if it works in every little pocket, like it's a good joke.
Yeah.
And I remember like a lot more of my comedy was kind of like race related, and then I moved to New York and it changed a little bit. And it also just, it evolves as you kind of get older, your comedy evolves, but I just remember like this one joke I had, and I forget the joke, but I was like talking about getting lost in a neighborhood, and then I saw a tanning salon, and I was like, phew, because it's like, you know.
Phew.
When you see a tanning salon, you're not in a bad neighborhood. And I told that joke at your coffee house in Bronzeville, and people were like laughing before I got to the punchline. And then I remember telling that in like a the Hideout, and they were like, that's racist. And it's like, no, it's not racist. I'm just commenting on like an honest reaction I had, and the fact that like, you know, Chicago neighborhoods are segregated in a certain way, and like, anyway, whatever. Maybe it is racist, but we all are, a little bit. And
well, let's talk about those different pockets, because you know that's one thing that I really try to push is being funny everywhere. Like, you know, Dion Cole, who writes for Conan, is one of Chicago comics. He would always tell me, and full disclosure, I used to struggle in front of like black crowds. Like I'll do okay at the Huxtable blacks, but when you go black, I would have problems, and I would have to find a way to work on my stage presence. Do you think going to maybe an urban room or doing like a Mikey O show helps you get your stage presence to have no fear?
I mean, it's great. Yeah, the hardest audiences for me were like the hipster crowds at the beginning, because they're just, you know, it's like but now that I am one, no, sorry. And then the gay ladies, which, you know, I have like a bendy vibe, and I always thought that they'd like me, but they're the hardest crowds. Gay men like laugh at everything because they're like happy because they're having sex all the time. And the like, you know, predominantly black crowds were always really supportive, and I think part of that is like there's a culture of stand-up, and they know what it is to be like a young stand-up, and they were always really supportive. But yeah, and a lot of my comedy kind of like, I talk about like things I'm afraid of, and I remember like, I was like fixated on like HIV and AIDS, and it was so funny. Now it's like kind of, it's like the airplane humor, because like all comics joke about it, and it's like not funny anymore. But in like the early 2000s, it was still kind of edgy, and I would joke about it, and not coming from a mean place, just coming from a place of like, the jokes were about like my fear of it. And I remember doing a show in Boys Town, and it was like all predominantly gay men who really like were the most affected by the epidemic out of, you know, all the pockets of people I'd ever performed in front of, and they loved it, and they laughed so hard, and it was like this moment where you're like, I can tell this joke in front of people that are affected by it, and if they're laughing, like it's not too soon. And like, I also like, I sound like a terrible person, but I had a wheelchair joke. It's really funny, guys, and it's true. Like, it's
Set it up.
I should tell it. Oh,
you gotta
okay.
tell it.
Well, it's a true story. So I was out with some friends, and we were at, what's that place on Clark? The Carol's. We're at Carol's, country, western, whatever. And they were waiting for their friend to roll up. And about an hour later, she does, literally in a wheelchair, And this is true, this happened, and I was like, oh, I don't need another offensive joke. But let's see where this night takes us. And the joke is like, it took us to a really good place. By the end of the night, we were all having a great time. We were in the center of the dance floor, dancing the night away without a care in the world, because we had someone to watch our stuff.
Now hold on.
Wait.
No, go ahead.
There are a couple things. I really only tell that joke in places that aren't handicap accessible, not because I'm afraid of somebody in a wheelchair hearing it, but because it's almost like a public service announcement. It's like, make this place handicap accessible. You know what I mean? Like, build a ramp. Like, that's what I say when I get
That's an awareness
groans.
campaign.
The what?
It's an awareness campaign.
It is an awareness campaign, but that's what, I mean, it's like subversive. I know that sounds so hokey to say about yourself. But wait, the one thing I want to say about that is, I did that joke one time and there was a guy in the audience in a wheelchair and his friends laughed the hardest. And like, he laughed. And it's like it's one of those things where it sounds terrible, but it's like when you're affected by something, like there's a little bit of a truth. Like, it didn't start out as a joke, it was just like this weird honest reaction because I had just got my wallet stolen like 2 weeks earlier, and I was like, oh, thank God. You know, but you also feel sad and dirty, but to make it funny, it's like we all win.
Well, I know, we do all win, but do you feel like sometimes, like when I would see you do jokes on the South Side, and you would say some people would say racist or edgy things.
I don't do those anymore. No.
Well, hold on. But people on the South Side will laugh at it, like you said, the guys in Boys Town will laugh at the age jokes. Do you think sometimes people who aren't in that bag feel like they don't have the right to laugh because it's not about them?
That could be it, or there could just be like it's like you, like if you're uncomfortable, you have this like kind of reaction to judge or to step away as opposed to kind of like embrace things. And I mean, I don't know. I think anything can be funny, like what we talked about earlier. Like I think anything can be funny if you're telling it with humanity. And I think like that's what improv taught me too. When you play characters, it's like a character versus a stereotype is something that has like a grain of honesty and truth to it. And so, like, if a joke is about anything, and if it's really based in like the type of stuff I do, it's like, if it's based in truth, then I think, you know, and if you have heart coming from your joke, then I think it's permissible, and people can read that. I had like a job interview. This is a joke, but it's actually a true story, with a guy who date raped a friend of mine in college, and.
Wait, so the guy you were going to interview
I was like,
with,
you look familiar. I was like, did he date my friend? No, date rape my friend in college. And it was a very awkward interview. And I wrote a joke about it. And it like made me feel better about the whole experience. And it's a rape joke, I guess, but it's like empowering because it kind of makes fun of him. So I think like, I think that that's kind of like a powerful thing about comedy. You can say things that are meaningful and do it kind of like in a sugar-coated way for people to like eat and think about.
So outside of like telling jokes on stage, you have your hands in different pots being a content creator. Had some funny videos online. You did some writing for some late night talk shows. How do you think you're trying to navigate yourself to stay on the stand-up stage or to branch out into, more bigger and better things?
I think like, as Megan, perfectly illustrates, I think kind of as a comedian now, there's so much technology at our disposal that you can really dabble and do all sorts of other things. And I think it's really just about building your voice, be it through Twitter or stand-up or, web videos or writing for a TV show. It's just about, like, if you have something to say, even like, as an artist, if you have something to say, you should try to say it in the best way you can or in as many ways as you can. And I like, I kind of like talking about dark things, but sugarcoating them. And that was like, the play that I wrote while I was in Chicago was a parody of American Girl dolls, which I think is like, it writes itself.
So hold on, the play she's speaking of, and let me see if I remember the name it was a Refugee
Girls Review. It was a parody of a play that existed for a decade in Chicago. And just really kind of like a garbage pail version of American Girl, but instead of little girls from periods in American history, we had little refugees from different continents. And
it's a comedy.
It's a comedy,
Okay.
and it was interesting working on that because it ran in Chicago, and it was not well received. And then I was young and I was apologetic at the end of it. I was like, we know this play may be a buzzkill, but donate to these local nonprofits. And we kind of sold out the idea, and then like when I workshopped it, and it ran in the New York Fringe, and we were completely unapologetic at the end. The end closing number was this song that was like just getting people to buy things, and the little girls had the like word buy in different languages, and it was just like so in your face about like buying into this concept, and it got great reviews. And that kind of like taught me about like when you do satire, you really have to have conviction and be unapologetic if you're really trying to say something. And yeah, it was like it's one of the things that I was very proud of, because I just remember like I kind of came from like a political, economic, Marxist college background, and like looking at American Girl and just being like, how is this real? And then being able to like joke about it in a way that was like political, and we never like, it wasn't making fun of the refugees, it was making fun of American Girls, like the way that they commodify these kind of experiences, and it's just like, it was very satisfying.
So did that experience help you maybe get your feet wet on taking on bigger and better things? Like, do you think there could be a Jena Friedman movie in the works, a TV show?
Please.
Well, not about your life, but do you think you can be a content creator of your edgy brand of, I guess, dark, sweet comedy?
I mean, like we didn't prepare anything ahead of time, so I'm just talking and not thinking before. But like, I have this web series that started as a parody of the New York Times wedding videos, which are also, it's like they write themselves. And this was, I saw one and I was inspired by it, and it's just kind of like, the web series is, it's about a serial killer and his fiancée as they plan their wedding. And we have a pilot that we're shopping around for TV. My manager's like, you should make a film about it. And I'm like, the joke, what's interesting to me isn't the serial killer. It's just the idea of like what you're willing to put up with in a relationship. Like it's not, it's like how far will you go for the person you love? And in New York, it's really hard to meet people. So hopefully it'll be a TV show. But that's kind of like, using that dark comedy to talk about things that everyone talks about, and that's kind of what I'm doing right now. And
Well, and before we let you go, do you think that your brand of comedy, if you stay true to it, people will, like, because people don't expect this darkness out of you. When
totally well-adjusted childhood. There's really no excuse.
I mean, do you think you can probably still push off this, the Jena Friedman way of life and way of comedy continuously?
Well, I think we're getting a little darker as a culture. I tour a lot, and I go to the UK, and they just have a darker comedic sensibility, and I think as a country, comedically, we're very young. As a country, we're just young in general. And like we don't have like dead bodies like buried under our cities like they do in like Scotland and London, or like Edinburgh and London. And so I think like dark comedy, Children's Hospital, even Louis, like there are shows on right now that are kind of, darker comedy is becoming a little bit more mainstream than it was even 10, 20 years ago. So hopefully.